Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the information in this presentation is not to be or construed as investment advice. The information presented are subject to change without notice, and while we have made every reasonable effort to ensure that the content is reliable and accurate, we have not independently verified the content and are not responsible for errors therein. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the IceCap Canadian Market Wrap with me, Richard Diaz. In this week's episode, we'll be reviewing Canada's labor market and how it's evolved over the last few decades. In the first section, we're going to quickly review some basic terminology, as some of these terms often get confused. We're then going to touch on some longer-term trends and how government employment has evolved over this cycle. Lastly, we're going to talk about Canada's most recent data release and share what we at IceCap are looking at. So let's get started. What's some key labor market terminology? To answer that, I've pulled this labor market tree from the Reserve Bank of Australia's website. The RBA is Australia's central bank, which is an incredible resource for all kinds of economic and financial market terminology. I highly recommend it. This tree splits out the working age population for Australia into different groups, but I can assure you it's the same in Canada. On the right side, it explains the basics of why people might not be in the labor force. Either they're retired, or permanently unable to work due to health reasons, or they're temporarily out of the labor force because they're caring for children or in school. On the left, you find the labor force. Note this includes the unemployed as well as the employed. So what are some basic ratios we need to keep in mind when thinking about the labor market? As we mentioned a second ago, the labor force is the sum of employed and unemployed people. A term you will often hear is the unemployment rate, and this is the percentage of people in the labor force that are unemployed. A lesser known, but arguably just as important term is the participation rate. This rate is the percentage of working age population that are in the labor force. I like this indicator because it allows us to draw some interesting demographic conclusions, and it provides a different insight on the healthcare or health of the economy. Of course, there are different types of unemployment, as I've laid out for you here. There's cyclical unemployment, which fluctuates with the normal ebbs and flows of the business cycle. There's structural unemployment, which is most often related to changes in the economy that basically permanently destroy jobs, like a street lamp lighter from the Victorian era. You can have frictional unemployment. I would call that the cost of doing business as and when people change jobs. And then there's seasonal unemployment, which I hope is self-explanatory. One that you might not be familiar is something called underemployment, or when someone is working well below their station, or where there's a skills or training mismatch. Before I go on, I want to make it clear that I'm aware there's loads more to the labor market than just unemployment or participation. There's wages, hours worked, vacancy rates, there's job surveys on expectations and pay. We're only just scratching the surface in this video, but I promise to touch on more of these things in the future. So how many people actually work in Canada? Well, there's actually two answers to that question. Answer number one is based on the labor force survey, and that number is 20.6 million. The Labor Force Survey is a monthly household survey, and the main objective of the survey is to divide working age population into three mutually exclusive groups: the employed, the unemployed, and those not in the labor force. The survey is the official source for the unemployment rate, and it collects data on socio-demographic characteristics of all those in the labor market. It's also much more up to date. Answer number two is based on the survey of employment, payrolls, and hours. It's 18.2 million and refers to the number of employees receiving pay and benefits during a given month. The survey excludes self-employed and owners or partners of unincorporated businesses, as well as the agricultural sector. But as you can see from the chart, they move up and down together, and they're obviously closely related. Naturally, total employment can be split into different categories. In this chart, we've split the labor force survey into goods producing and service producing employment. And going back 40 years, it's really cool to see how this has changed. Goods producing employment used to dwarf that of services, and now it's the other way around. But what qualifies as goods producing? The following chart can answer that question. The red bars are goods producing, and these include manufacturing, construction, agriculture, oil sector. And the blue bars are services, and these include healthcare, trade, and transport. In green, you can see government or public administrators. We can also split the data up between full-time and part-time. As you might have guessed, there's more full-time employment than there is part-time. This chart's cool because I've put the scales on the same magnitude but different ranges. And what this allows you to do is shows you how important fluctuations in full-time employment matter to when there's a recession or when there's a change in the cycle and the overall impact and the overall figure. As we alluded to, total employment can be split into public, private, and self-employment. This chart gives you a feel for the magnitude or the size difference in each different section. You can see private employment is about 13.5 million. Public employment is about 4.5. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then self-employment is at the bottom with 2.6 or 2.7 million people. This chart is something I really like to look at because, as I mentioned, you can get a real feel for what's going on in the labor market and how it's changed over time. The green line is baby boomers, for lack of a better term, and you can see how attitudes towards work have evolved for that cohort. In the late 1990s, participation rates were falling, and then they soared after 2000. For young people, I think it's quite a stark reality that they're leaving the labor force in my view, at the highest rate in a long, long time. And you can see that this blue line is now at a post ex-COVID all-time low. One thing that's really important to note, though, is that for prime-aged workers, so those are usually the most productive and the highest earning, aged between 25 and 54, you can see that that number is actually relatively stable, and that's all the way at the top of this chart. The third section is about one of the biggest changes to the labor force that we've seen in recent years, and that's the sharp rise in government employment. Here we have two definitions: public administrators and the broader public sector employees, which includes everything from doctors, nature park employees, and teachers. As you can see, one is about 1.3 million, and the broader definition much larger, naturally, at 4.5 million. I think this huge jump can help explain some of the decline in productivity in Canada. That's what we spoke about last week. But this data means nothing without some context. So how do we compare? The following chart includes two G7 countries, the US and the UK. The US might not be a fair comparable as they do not have universal health care, and in general, the state's quite a bit smaller. But the UK does have something called the NHS, a National Health Service. But again, Canada's public sector employment as a share of total is well above that of the UK, and it wasn't always like that. For more context, here's a comparison between public sector workers and self-employment. Self-employment has a tangible positive economic impacts not only on wages and salaries, but also on per capita growth and poverty reduction. It's usually crucial for innovation and entrepreneurship, both of which are key for productivity. This chart, in my view, is absolutely horrific. It shows that self-employment has been flat for 15 years, while public employment has continued to skyrocket. It also, I think, shows a change in attitude towards risk. Why start your own business when you can just go work for the government? To bring it home, let's touch on what's going on recently. Every month, the Labor Market Survey releases their data, and you can see the month-on-month changes to employment. That's the pink bars in this chart. What we look at is the monthly release and the expectations, which are an aggregate of economic expectations. We usually take the median number. Here we see the last month it was 46.7. However, you can see again on the chart that it fluctuates wildly. Some countries have more reliable data than others, and there's always revisions to these numbers ex post. As I showed you before, the data is split into different sectors or categories, and you can see the sector contributions for the monthly release. And so this is the most recent month of September, and you can see where there was massive increases in job growth and obviously decreases in job growth, or where there was none at all. And this can shed some light on what's going on from a short-term perspective in each of those different sectors. Something that's really fascinating and quite rare is the degree to which the rise in public sector employment has contributed to the overall increase in total employment. And that's what this chart is showing. Blue line is total employment, red line is public employment, and the gray line is private employment. And you can see up until a couple of months ago, there was actually more public employment from this January 2023 to, let's say, the middle of 2024 than there was private. And that's an incredible contribution. In my view, for ill, but nevertheless, it was a contribution. As I showed you earlier, private sector employment is 3 times as big as public sector employment. So for that public number to be contributing so much to the overall level is not only incredible, but also speaks to the weakness in the overall labor market. And that's what we started to see in the next two charts. We've talked about population before. We've talked about a poor labor mix. This chart shows you that there's not enough jobs for the newcomers. And how do we know this? Well, the employment rate has fallen to a 20-year low. Consider that with the idea that so many of those jobs are actually public sector employees. We know that the participation rates for prime workers are steady, but again, this chart shows you that they've peaked and are now starting to fall. And then again, think about productivity growth and all the other stuff we've talked about over the last few weeks with respect to lack of business investment and overall lack of GDP growth, especially when you account for population. The final chart is unemployment rate. And you can see from the chart, both unemployment rate and the number of unemployed are both rising. And that's consistent with what we've talked about before, which is a recession. And that's what these gray bars are again. And again, you can see naturally when you have weak growth or you don't have enough jobs for the number of people coming into your economy, your unemployment rate will rise and naturally the number of unemployed will rise. What's also interesting about this chart is you can see something else we discussed in this week's video, which is the frictional unemployment, which means even in the best of times, you still have about 5.5%, 6% unemployment. And this, of course, is different for different countries. So that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and follow for more. As always, feel free to get in touch. See you next week.